Oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, we are live and we are talking Lovecraft Country. How is everybody? Thank you all for watching my past podcast. It's really cool to have everybody on, and the viewership keeps going up. And this show has really caught a lot of your imagination, as it has mine. And this show has also dealt with some pretty serious things. So today we're going to break down the music, as always. We're going to break down some of the episode, what happened, some of the themes going on, and even go into the Tulsa Race Riots, which is really the backdrop for this episode. So, once again, thanks everybody. Like and subscribe. It means a lot to me. And I'm going to see what we can do on Sunday nights to keep the love going. Maybe talk about other black types of entertainment, in sci fi and fantasy. So I'll see what we can do after the season finale next week. Now, the music played this week was really beautiful, and it was mostly by Sonia Sanchez, one of my favorite poets. If you don't know Sonia Sanchez, go find her out. Go read some of her work. She is absolutely fabulous. And she actually was in the documentary I mentioned last week about Toni Morrison. In fact, what is the name of this documentary? Let me get it for you guys. Toni Morrison documentary. That's the sound of me typing right there. And it's called The Pieces I Am. Watch it. Okay? If you have never read anything by Toni Morrison, or you really don't know who she is, you should. She is the greatest American writer. I put her right next to Faulkner. I really have a soft spot for Faulkner, but Toni Morrison, it's like head to head when it comes to American writers, two really fabulous American writers. So we had two pieces by Toni Morrison. One is Don't Kill Dub, okay, which is that first one that we heard, which was really, really beautiful. And that was in her voice, I believe. And then Catch the Fire, which was a sung version, which was original for Lovecraft Country, which took me by surprise. I really didn't think that that was something original, uh, but it was okay for the show. They're making a lot of great original music for the show, but I thought it was like someone like Marian Anderson or something like that that had that was singing that. So I was wrong about that, and that was absolutely gorgeous. I would love to get more information. If you know who sang that, please let me know in the comments, because I definitely want a copy of that. So before we get into Tulsa and everything, we'll do a little bit of history on Tulsa. Let's just break down what's going on. And man, oh man, a lot is going on. I'm not sure how they're going to close it out for the season finale. Clearly, it's going to have to take place in Artem, with Tick going back to Artem. And we'll see if Christina actually kills him. There's been these little foreshadowings of there's parallel universes, there's parallel worlds. Does Tick actually die or not? It makes me very, very curious. Well, it should, right? I'm sure it's making all of you very, very curious. That's the whole point. And we shall see. We shall see. But, that part, it was just more like taking care of business, like the first 10 minutes of the 10 to 15 minutes of the episode. We find out that Diana is really sick with that curse, and they call on Christina to get the curse off of her, and she makes a deal. She's like, I'll do it, but well, actually, she can't take the curse off of her, but she can kind of reset it, and she needs close relatives' blood in order to do it. But she says she'll do it if Atticus willingly goes back with her to Artem. And we also find out that, well, not find out, but Montrose finally reveals to Atticus that, hey, maybe George is your father, which most of you out there in the Lovecraft Country groups had already figured out, because you guys are absolutely amazing. uh, and you guys figure everything out. I would have loved to have Lost, the show Lost, which was kind of the brainchild of J.J. Abrams, even though he left after the first season. But I would have loved to have Lost at this time as of the internet, where everybody's got so many theories. But I remember when Lost did come out, it was the beginning of the internet, and I would spend hours in all these little groups. Right now, like 5 page long theories and everything. And I was mostly wrong about them. And I'm sure, so I kind of gave up on theorizing. I'm terrible at it. I leave it all to you guys and then I report back on the theories on here. But so I would love it if I could go back and somehow find those old sites and maybe even find some of the stuff that I wrote because I was insane with Lost. But this show, yes, it's full of the possibility of theorizing. And so we find out Montrose is not the father. And Atticus, of course, is really pissed about it because he's like, man, I had to like live through the torture of you for all those years. And I respected you on the one, just hinging on this one fact that you're my father. And it ends up that you're not. It's a very emotional moment. And then Letty comes in. See, I'm saying her name right, Letty. And she says that Diana's fever has kind of broke, so she may be ready to get that reset spell set on her. And then who pops in? But it's Hippolyta. And I don't feel so all alone because somebody in one of the Lovecraft Country Facebook groups had mentioned that. Does anybody think it's weird how they're pronouncing her name? Because I'm trying to say Hippolyta all the time. I was saying Hippolyta all the time until that episode, the I Am episode, and I noticed, oh, it's Hippolyta. It's very much Hippolyta and not Hippolyta. So that's just how it's pronounced, and I'll try to remember that because, as you all know, I'm terrible with names. So, yes, guys, she comes back, and we find out she's been traveling through time and space, and time and space is relative, right? So, all that time that she spent out in space, she only spent like maybe a couple weeks, as we saw only a couple weeks passed on this Earth, or their Earth. So that's cool. We get to see more Hippolyta because she is absolutely awesome and she's got this whole new vibe with her. She's like, she's not taking any shit from anybody, right? Which I love because she is, as I've said many times, my favorite character on the show. And way back from the beginning, I was like, well, they got to give her more to do. And boy, have they given her a lot to do. And she says to these guys, look, I got the power. I can travel through space and time, and we are going to save my daughter. And how are we going to save her? Well, you guys told me this book of names business is way back in Tulsa and it was destroyed in the fire. We're going to get it before the fire burns everything down. And that's exactly what they do. And that's when things really click in this episode. And that's when we get into the Tulsa Race Riots, guys. The Tulsa Race Riots, most of you probably know what it was, but we'll just break it down a little bit. And it's funny now, Tulsa is in the national conversation because a lot of people didn't know about it. I found out about it maybe 3 to 4 years ago, so it's kind of recent for me to that they teach in school. It's kind of forgotten history, but it got into the forefront with the Watchmen because the Watchmen's whole premise is set upon the fact that blacks have gotten reparations due to this Tulsa race riot. So in Oklahoma, and I didn't finish Watchmen. Forgive me, it didn't interest me as much as this show has interested me. But I'll eventually get back and watch the rest of Watchmen. But yeah, the whole premise of it is that in the opening sequence of the show shows the Tulsa race riots, But I think this episode really dug into it on an emotional level, which Watchmen didn't. Watchmen just kind of showed it on a visceral level, which is fine because that was the whole purpose of it, just to show, look, this is where we're coming from. These people had this horrible thing happen to him and them, and the government kind of tried to help them somehow, some way. A fantasy, right? But that the race massacre happened in 1921. I'm reading here from Britannica. Okay, it's called the Race Riot of 1921. It occurred in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on May 31st of 1921. It's said that it's left between 30 to 300 people dead, mostly blacks. The official number that I got from another site was 39, I believe. And I took some notes here, so it'd be nice to read them. Official death toll 39, 26 black, 13 white, and it was in his neighborhood of Greenwood, which had about 10,000 residents. And it was called Black Wall Street because money flowed there. Money was in the community. And what sparked this riot? Dick Rowland, this young African American shoe shiner, was accused of assaulting a white elevator operator named Sarah Page in the elevator of a building in downtown Tulsa. The next day, the Tulsa Tribune printed a story saying that Rowland had tried to rape Page, with an accompanying editorial stating that a lynching was planned for that night. That evening, mobs of both African Americans and whites descended on the courthouse where Rowland was being held when a confrontation between armed blacks there to protect Rowland and a white protester resulted in the death of the latter. The white mob was incensed and the Tulsa massacre was thus ignited. So it was over 2 days. Mobs of white people looted and set fire to African American businesses and homes, and it was absolute tumult, which the show showed. Okay, this episode showed. And after the massacre, there's a brief official inquiry, but documents related to the massacre disappeared soon afterward, including the fact that this kid's charges, they were probably bogus. They say that what probably happened is he might have stepped on her, the elevator lady. He may have stepped on her shoe by mistake or bumped into her, and he ran out screaming. Okay, he ran out screaming out of the um, elevator. Okay, or maybe not screaming. I may be adding that part, but he definitely ran out of the elevator scared. And she, the rumor came that, okay, he raped. There is the suggestion that this riot was much more, and a lot more people died. And the Tulsa Oakland Cemetery suggested that the death toll was much higher than the original records indicate. In its preliminary recommendations, when they formed a Tulsa Race Riot Commission to investigate the massacre formally, the state of Oklahoma, they suggested it pay 33 million in restitution, some of it to the 121 surviving victims who had been located. However, no legislative action was ever taken on the recommendation, and the commission had no power to force legislation. In April 2002, a private religious charity, the Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry, paid a total of $28,000 to the survivors, a little more than $200 each, using funds raised from private donations. Man, oh man, oh man. So we get to see where the Watchmen got this idea of paying the restitution. Just that in that show, it actually happens. Here we deal with reality, which is a little bit different than the Watchmen, right? So how do they end up back there? Well, our girl Hippolyta has the power, okay? She knows how to fix that machine that she had shot and broken, and she becomes the motherboard. She's got those, remember, she has those little things on her wrist. She plugs into the machine, and in she is, and she opens a portal to 1921. They end up in this hotel that Montrose's dad would take them to. when he had a little bit extra money, and that is when we begin the most powerful parts of this story. Specifically, Montrose's emotional reaction to it. Because not only is this his childhood, where he was physically abused by his father for being gay, but also the PTSD that he has from being there, and a little bit of survivor's guilt too, you would imagine. So he kind of freezes. He doesn't know what to do. And it's also interesting to see Atticus and Letty's reaction, because the 1950s are bad, but they never saw anything like this. And that just made me think about, imagine us younger black folk. I'm almost 40, but I consider myself a young black folk. But imagine if we could just transport ourselves back to one generation back or two and be in the 1960s. That's why I always say those folks out there that cry about everything, that are offended by everything, oh my God, just like grow a set of you know what. Because you don't know what real rough times were like. So imagine if we could go back and just experience that. And it was interesting to see people from the 1950s, where we really associate, because I guess we have more media, television. When we think of like the black struggle, it's like slavery, which has a lot, there's a lot of accounts of slavery and how hard that was. And then, sicking the dogs on black folks in the 1950s and getting beat up by police and et cetera, et cetera. And then there's this whole in between, from the Emancipation Proclamation up to the 1950s, where it's almost like, I don't want to say it's forgotten history, but there's not a lot written about it. One, because according to some, it was the most prosperous time for black Americans. They had money, they bought land, they built schools. It was a prosperous time, okay? But some terrible things happened too. Birth of a Nation was produced. The Ku Klux Klan went into the millions. So you can't say that it was good times either. But it's this history that's a little lost. It's a little lost. So it's wonderful when we can dig into that and really see some of the horrible things that happened to blacks at that time, and how even still they prospered, which is where I think the important theme of this episode is the importance of progeny, is the importance of carrying on tradition among the black among black folks, and among families, so that we can learn and not forget and build. By the way, I forgot to change my slides. There's one here for those of you who happen to be looking at the screen. It's not mandatory, but I do put a few slides up. And here is the Black Dispatch that has the story: loot, arson, and murder, $4 million lost. Sarah Page not to be found. Tales. Tolson yanks leads Assy from block with fire ordnance. And this is from June 11th, 1921. So long story on that, and you can find all these online in his Smithsonian. The Smithsonian has a lot of these, so you can look on there. And here it says Little Africa on Fire, Tulsa Race Riot, June 1921. So that's a historical photograph postcard there. And this area was called Little Africa because of how much money was generated in this area. It was millions and millions and millions. And what people don't realize is how once that was gone, it was kind of gone forever. And I'm gonna get into this towards the end, the people that Montrose named towards the end of the episode, and who they were. But he did a shop, HL Buyers. And I'm reading here from Medium.com, which was an article written by, oh God, forgive me, but I'm gonna say her name incorrectly. Yachelia Israel? Yachelia. I'm so sorry. Yachelia Israel. But she wrote this beautiful article, Black History Fun Fact Friday, Black Wall Street and the Power of Community. And I love this one paragraph here where she talks about these different stores. You know, they had restaurants, grocery stores, public schools. They built their own on the backs of a drive towards honest entrepreneurship. So this is a Booker T. Washington dream come true. In fact, he loved this city. We mentioned him in the episode. Clothes bought at Elliott and Hooker's Clothing at 124 North Greenwood could be fitted across the street at H.L. Breyer's shop at 105 North Greenwood and then cleaned around the corner at Hope Watson Cleaners at 322 East Archer. The dollar in this community rotated 36 to 100 times, taking as long as a year before it left the community. Today, the dollar leaves the black community in less than 15 minutes. And this is such an important point. And one of the reasons why a lot of people believe that Tulsa had to happen as far as the destruction of it, because one thing that keeps blacks in a state of suppression in America is that blacks do not keep their money among themselves. That was the message of Malcolm X. Keep the money among yourselves. Because we see everybody else does it. The Jews do it, the Chinese do it, Latinos do it. You know, they immigrate into America and they keep that money gyrating among themselves. I was talking to a fellow tonight actually about the Jewish community here in Sao Paulo, Brazil, because he works as a security guard for some Jewish folk. And he said it's incredible. There's no poor Jewish people because when they start out, the community helps them. They pay it back and they're expected to even pay it forward. But it's very rare that you meet a poor Jew. Now, this is not because of some secret cabal, some secret Illuminati plot. No, they just know how to keep their money and their funds and their help amongst each other. This doesn't make them racist. And that's the problem, right? People would call Malcolm a racist because he's like, I'm not anti white, I'm pro black, right? So important to keep that money gyrating. So, guys, especially during this coronavirus pandemic, support your black businesses. I know I do. Here in Brazil, this black lady just opened a restaurant, pizzeria. I stopped buying from the old pizza place, and they made some good pizza. But I'm buying from her, and her pizza in the beginning was not that good. But I still bought from her. But she got better. Her pizza maker got really good, actually. So support your black businesses. Support, 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 support. Okay? In any way possible. And I got another lady that I always try to support too. Another black woman here who opened a Caribbean, Ecuadorian type restaurant. And she makes this shrimp paella. Oh my goodness. It's really great. So support. That's another message that I took from this because that's what Tulsa was all about. That's what Tulsa is was all about. So there's the trio. They go back. They try to blend in, although later we find out that Letty forgot to change her shoes. And the plan is to go to the family house um, of Atticus's ancestors and find this book of names. Oh, excuse me, guys. Give me a second here. Ooh, excuse me. And Letty is tasked with doing this because Montrose, in the middle of all this, sorry guys, I had a late dinner and I guess talking made it come up. Because Montrose, in the middle of this, he disappears. He just disappears out of nowhere. And we're like, where is he? And this is right after he watches himself getting beat with a switch from a tree because his father found him kind of being flowery. And Atticus sees this. And then I think Atticus also realizes this is generational. Just like you can have generational hope, you can have generational sickness. And this is regardless of race, guys, regardless of race. So we see the abusive dad, Montrose's abusive dad. Montrose was an abusive father to Atticus, but it was also a lot of self hate. He wanted to just do everything to take that gayness out of him, which, as we all know, cannot happen. And if you don't know, now you know out of somebody, no matter how much you beat them. So Montrose disappears. Atticus and Letty realize, hey, we got to split up if we're going to find Montrose and find this book, because probably Montrose is going to try to save George or warn him that he's going to be shot in the future. But it ends up that's not what Montrose is trying to do. Montrose is actually finding himself. He finds himself and he's with this little boy called Thomas. And he's telling Thomas they can't hang out anymore because Thomas is a faggot. So again, self-hate, right? He wanted to just squash any softness out of him. And Atticus finds him as he's watching this, and he wants to save his friend Thomas. And Atticus is like, man, you can't do it. Because what if you do save him? And what if, for whatever reason, that makes you eventually secure in your sexuality at a much younger age? And this means that you don't meet my mom, and if you don't meet my mom, you don't get me, etc., etc. So he tells him not to do it. But Montrose is set on doing this. He's really set on doing this. And it's a, but they have a beautiful moment in this conversation because Montrose realizes there's nothing in this world that he wanted more than to be Atticus's dad. Even though he wasn't the best dad, he definitely wants to be his dad. And these two, man, they just go back and forth. Love you, hate you, love you, hate you, love you, hate you. But what I like about Atticus is that he's understanding. He tries to understand. He may not understand it completely. He may not ever understand what his father went through, but little by little, he kind of gets it. I mean, some of the scenes, especially the scene where the father was beating him, felt like, oh, pity party, pity party. And Montrose was just going on and on. And it was like, okay, well, you made your point. I got what your point is. That, look, my life was shit, and this is why I treated you like shit. It was kind of in your face. Maybe it could have been done a little bit more subtly, but it needed to be said. Atticus needed to see and hear that in order to understand what his father had gone through, in order to understand why his father was the way he was, in order to perhaps have a full reconciliation at some point. And I think they kind of do, you know. They have a nice cry together. The man cry, the macho cry, which without that many tears. Meanwhile, Letty's in this house and she's out looking um for the book. She's in Dora's house, okay, which is Tick's family, and she runs upstairs while there's all the shooting because she realizes everybody in this house is going to get burned to death. So she goes upstairs. She is going to find the book, and then the grandmother, okay, comes up, and she finds her, and she's ready to shoot her. He's like, man, I am gonna shoot you if you don't tell me what the hell you're doing. So Letty goes for broke and tells her, I'm from the future, and this we're looking for this book, and I can prove it because you got this birthmark, etc., etc. And Dora's grandmother she kind of accepts it. Well, she doesn't kind of accept it, she just does. And she gives her the book, but the house is burning down. And this is one of the more powerful scenes where she is burning. And that's where we get Sonia Sanchez's poem, Catch a Fire, as the room is overtaken by flames. She, or actually, I think it's Don't Kill Doug that is said right there. But anyhow, Sonia Sanchez's poem is in the background, very powerful, and we get this image of fire. And the second song that's the song that's sung, okay, which I believe is Catch a Fire. The first one, the poem, is Don't Kill Dub. Again, it's about fire and how fire cleanses. Out of fire you're reborn. So there's a lot of symbolism here. The city is set on fire, this woman is set on fire, the song and the poem about fire, even Hippolyta, because she's having a problem holding this porter together, so there's sparks coming out of her, so she's having electricity run through her, which is burning like a fire. She kind of has a storm moment. She kind of looks like Storm when she's ready to bring down the wrath of the thunder and the lightning. And fire is what everybody needs, right? The fire inside, this rebirth. And that's an important message for the show, is that although Tulsa broke down, from the ashes you can build something greater. Although this woman burnt, literally burnt down with the house, she's standing in front of the woman who's going to give birth to her great great grandchild and give birth to that hope that she has, that this is not it. There's something greater than this. So there's so much powerful symbolism going on in this episode. This shit was deep. Oh my goodness. But this show tends to go there. It's at least these last couple episodes, ever since I Am, have really gotten into a lot of thematic areas that are very strong. I think stronger than the story itself. I think, the story itself is interesting, but it's not what's keeping me watching. One, because I said, if you go all the way back to episode one, or maybe it was episode two, where I was like, oh my god, there's magic involved. Ugh, I'm not a huge fan of like magic, Harry Potter type stuff. It's just not my favorite genre. I just kind of accepted it then. Magic, like sprinkles of magic, and then a whole lot of sci-fi around it. No, it's 100% magic on top, and it's like, okay, I've just accepted it. But I like how they sprinkle in different types of genres every week, so it becomes like a genre anthology, which is kind of cool. So yeah, the story itself is like whatever, just let's see what happens next week. But the thematic points that they're making every week is extremely powerful, and I can't recall another show that's managed to do that. I mean, I know Watchmen didn't for me. Maybe, I quit on about episode 3 or 4. I'll watch the rest of it, but that for me seemed more like a straightforward adventure with some, obviously, some commentary. It couldn't be without commentary. But this show goes beyond commentary. This show, it seems to be speaking directly to black folks about the importance of their history, the importance of their roots, the importance of keeping that fire alive. This is what it seems to be speaking to. It's not trying to make a point to white people. Like, look how bad you all were. I don't think it's not trying to make that point. It's not trying to make a point even to black people. Yeah, look, black people are awesome. It's not trying to do that either. It's really, going back to last week with the influence of Toni Morrison's work. She just wants you to think about this. Think of the importance of these actions and what they represent in the history of black people, in your history now, which is a totally different realm, psychological realm, than if you take something like Get Out, as wonderful as it is. Get Out is a commentary. It's a wonderful commentary. Love that movie. Or like Bamboozled, great Spike Lee movie I watched for the first time this year. It's a deep commentary, an important commentary. Whereas this show, I don't feel commentary as much. It's its theme, its emotion, its history, it's the importance of roots, it's the importance of family line, it's the importance of that history, which is really, really, really an important theme. Because it's one that it has been broached, I'm sure, in other media, in other black media. It's broached all the time when you get into media by, white folks, um, even Latinos. There's some stuff that deals with this thing, the importance of heritage and roots. Black Americans, it's a difficult thing to broach sometimes because what are Black American roots? Because so many of the roots were lost when those ships came over. That's why I tend to say Black American, because what connection do most blacks still have to Africa? And Africa is a big continent, right? So just like we don't say European Americans, they kind of know, like Italian American, French American, German American, Irish American. They're very specific. I've never heard a white person say, "Oh, I'm of European American descent." No. So, I mean, we have some ideas of what countries the blacks, the Africans were taken from, but even still, what connection is there to that? So it's very difficult sometimes for blacks to find their roots, to be able to tell their story, because what are they? Especially when some of it is hidden in this country. I mean, it's hidden outside this country, but within this country, it's hidden. The good and the bad. I mean, you start reading about black history and you realize there were some incredible black people, especially, like I said, right after the emancipation. Blacks that got into government. That started the Republican Party. Well, not started, but really got into government after that. The Republicans were mostly black back then, guys. So there's a lot to unpack. A lot to unpack. And I'm loving every minute of it. I hope you are too. I really hope you are. And then we have this little kind of Back to the Future moment where, he's the guy that ends up being the guy that he was told about from his uncle and his dad when they were getting beat up by this white mob. And then this stranger arrived with this bat swinging like Jackie Robinson. And it ends up that it was Tick all along, because he's looking at these kids getting beat up and he's like, oh my God, who's gonna save him? Something's wrong, the time portal, whatever, is something must have screwed it up because the guy's not coming there to save these kids, and he realizes, oh, I'm the one. There happens to be a bat there. I liked how they played it. I would have wished, because these kids clearly saw Atticus's face. So for me, it's kind of, and they weren't like super young because, it's difficult to remember everything from your youth, before you were 10 or something. But some things I can remember pretty well. I mean, I don't think I could imagine the face of some people. Like if I close my eyes, I can't bring back their face, but I'm pretty sure if I saw them again, uh, I would be like, oh yeah, I remember you. So I would think that his face would be kind of seared in their minds, especially because of how tense the moment was. Maybe it wasn't, but I mean, it's three of them. You think that they would kind of remember them, and then when Atticus grew up to be the strong, strapping man that he is, they would be like, "Oh, you look exactly like the guy that beat the shit out of a bunch of white folks with a baseball bat." So I would have. preferred, I mean, this would have been kind of cool if Montrose knew, they just never told him. And then Montrose was like, oh shit, my son is that guy. And he kind of lured him to that spot. You know, that whole conversation he was having about, oh, I'm not here to warn George. Instead of saying, I want to save this boy Thomas who gets shot in the face, which led to nothing because then he realized, because then he decided not to do it. Is like, no, I'm not here to um, save the boy. I'm here because you got to do something, you know? And it would have been nice if it went about that way. Like if Montrose put it together as like, oh shit, like gotten Atticus to go there somehow, some way, it would have been interesting. So, and done it the way that he did, because if he had just told him, I don't think Atticus would have believed him, or I don't know. But exactly how it played out, but him telling him afterwards, like, you're that mysterious stranger. It was kind of a cheesy line. I think I would have done it the other way, found a way to do it the other way. And and then they would have been like, you know, how could I tell you that it was you? Or I couldn't explain it till now. And now I understand how it was that it was you. Because look, we're here at this moment. Go beat up those kids or those white guys. So okay, whatever. And then getting here towards the end, and we have Hippolyta. Her hair turns blue. She goes full out storm. I love it. Like I said, she is like, I am woman, hear me roar level. Everything's changed for her. She came to save her daughter. She wasn't able to hold that portal open, but then she used all her motherly powers to keep it open, and that was such a cool scene. She's in all the cool scenes now. She's in the coolest scenes now. Oh, thank you for giving me my Hippolyta, and I hope we get a whole lot of Diane finding her power, because as we in the beginning, towards the beginning of the episode, Christina mentioned how, wow, these are her drawings. She has a lot of power. Like, she's drawing stuff from the book of names. Like, she knows stuff she doesn't even know she knows. So imagine how much power this little girl has. It's got to come out. And I will really, really, really want to see that come out. And to close, though, as she's leaving the portal open, Montrose is looking out on the street and he's having like just this terrible time because he's watching the city burn. Letty's coming back real slow, which kind of weirded me out. I mean, I don't know, maybe, well, she should have hurried up. She was like walking slowly down the street. I know maybe things are happening at different times relative to each other, but still, I mean, Letty doesn't know that, so I didn't really dig that scene where she was walking slowly down the street. I mean, it looked beautiful. She's walking through the fire, but we already saw her in the house with the fire not touching her because she's got the invincibility spell on her. But I would have liked to have seen her run, the urgency of the matter, run back to be able to jump through that portal. But yeah, they needed a slow mo fire shot, whatever. But Hippolyta does her thing. In Montrose, he is reading out of. Oh, I'm sorry, he's not reading. As he's looking out, he's calling out these names, guys. And I want to close tonight's episode talking about some of these people. They were all real people. Oh, and by the way, little note, the Google Map coordinates from the episode I Am were correct, because I read in an article where the writer put it on Google Maps and he found out it was somewhere in the middle of Kansas, and apparently it really was out there in the middle of Kansas. But he mentioned some people. He names Pegleg Taylor at Standpipe Hill, the last stand. He was a World War One veteran, okay, who stole ammunition. And then he went up the hill and fought off the mob as long as he could. All of this you can find online if you just put in these people's names and on Google and put Tulsa Race Riot afterwards. You get a lot of information on them. Byers Taylor Shaw we talked about already, right? And that importance of the money gyrating within the community. He mentioned Dr. Jackson, Dr. A.C. Jackson, which was considered one of the best surgeons in the country. Again, you can Google these people, find pictures of them. He was shot in the face, and nobody knows who the shooter was, but there was a white police officer with the shooter. Callie Rogers, she remember he said Rogers and her had to leave her invalid daughter because she escaped with one daughter who was insane and had to leave the invalid at home, and the mob took the daughter outside, sat her on a chair. She watched her house burn. Later on, she was found by the Red Cross, I believe. They saved her. And Callie Rogers and her family lived at 608 East Easter Street, and they were completely self-sustainable, this family. And then after that they just weren't anymore, which is a sad part about, well, not sad, tragic part of what happened here, is that these folks, they didn't need anybody's assistance, they didn't need any government assistance, nothing, nothing, nothing. After that, they needed it. And some folks will argue that the welfare state is one of the biggest enemies to the black community if you just look at, pre 1950s to post 1950s. But that's a whole nother Tom Sowell topic, which I don't want to get into right now. Along the road to Sand Springs, a white couple named Merrill and Ruth Phelps, remember he mentioned White Phelps, hid and fed black riot victims in the basement of their home for 4 days. And oh my God, I apologize because I copied and pasted and I forgot where I took this information from. So it's out there, guys. It's it's out there. But damn, I always like to source my information, so forgive me for that. But they hid white families, so similar to, like, Anne Frank during the Holocaust. The Phelps home, which still stands, became something of a safe house for black Tulsans who had managed not to be imprisoned by the white authorities. And the massacres last recorded fatality occurred on August 20th with the death of Commodore Knox, a young black man. Um, that was the last person he mentioned before Thomas. So that's the episode. Wonderful episode. Loved it. Curious as to what's going to happen next. I guess it's going to get more plot heavy towards the end here. But some folks were confused on whether this was going to be a limited series or a full series. Guys, from all I've read, this is just season one of what will hopefully be a nice, long, and interesting series. Hopefully not too long, because usually when it gets too long, it loses steam a bit. But a good 7 seasons, 6, 7 seasons, I could do with, right? That's a nice run for a series like that. But so if everything doesn't get completely resolved at the end of next week's episode, that is why. So if it seems like it's open ended, and I doubt that they're going to cancel this, I hope not, because it seems like it's become a bit of a hit for HBO. I hope it doesn't get canceled. So that's it. I did write down one. My favorite line is when the white mob is showing up, and Letty is in Atticus's ancestors' homes, and the father says, "If anybody gets close, you shoot to warn, then you shoot to kill." And that's another thing, folks. Protect yourselves out there. You got the right to protect yourself. Now, I'll leave you with that. I don't want to get too political. But I love this. Some of these white folks ain't messing. And the way things have been the last, well, I don't want to put it all on this last administration because it's been like this for so long. So just protect yourself and your family, and especially with whatever happens at the after this next election, protect yourself and your family. It is your right. Second Amendment right. Okay? And that is all. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I love all of you. You are so cool. Leave comments below. Leave your thoughts. Leave whatever you want.